Sewing the Rainbow, the story of Gilbert Baker and the rainbow flag, by Gail E. Pittman, and illustrated by Holly Clifton Brown. In a small town in Kansas, where everything was gray and dull and flat, there was a little boy who was full of color and sparkle and glitter. His name was Gilbert. Gilbert loved visiting his grandmother's clothing store. He'd sit next to her while she sewed and draw beautiful gowns and costumes. Gilbert dreamed of someday bringing these drawings to life. But one day, his father took away his art supplies and tore up his drawings. Surrounded by building blocks and erector sets, sports gear and slingshots, Gilbert's colorful, sparkly, glittery personality started to fade, and he too became gray and dull and flat, just like the Kansas landscape. When I grow up, he dreamed, I'll go somewhere that's filled with color. But that didn't happen. Instead, when Gilbert turned 18, he received a letter that knocked every last bit of sparkle out of him. Gilbert hated his dull, flat uniform, and he refused to shoot the gun they gave him. "I won't do it," he said. "I'm not going to carry a gun." They made him do push-ups. They called him ugly names, but Gilbert wouldn't budge. The idea of shooting a gun made him feel sick. So they sent him to San Francisco, where he would never have to pick up a gun again. The day Gilbert arrived in San Francisco, he saw magic. Instead of the gray, dull, flat landscape of Kansas, there were rolling green hills, the shimmering blue bay, and a cool white fog wafting over the Golden Gate Bridge. Gilbert was home. Finally, he could breathe. He could be his colorful, sparkly, glittery self. He thought about his grandmother's clothing store. He thought about the drawings his father tore up, and he realized he wanted all of that back. So Gilbert taught himself to sew, and he created fabulous costumes just like the ones he drew when he was a little boy. Word got around fast. He sewed regalia for Mama Jose and her imperial court. He sewed costumes for famous singers like Sylvester. He sewed banners for protests, marches, and rallies. Gilbert's creations were everywhere. He was making the city more and more colorful by the day. There was just one thing that continued to blemish their beautiful city. It was a symbol that in Gilbert's community was a constant reminder of evil. "We need a new logo," his friend Harvey said to him one day. And Gilbert got an idea. He bought huge balls of cotton fabric, buckets of dye, and a lot of thread. Then he gathered up all his friends and got to work. They cut the fabric into long strips, dyed them in big trash cans, then headed to the local laundromat to rinse and dry the strips. They ironed the creases so the fabric was nice and smooth. Then Gilbert began to sew. They worked until dawn. By the time the sun rose, Gilbert and his friends had created 2 beautiful rainbow flags, but their work wasn't over. "A flag belongs in the wind," Gilbert said. The big day arrived. A crowd gathered around City Hall. Gilbert held his breath. Would people understand his flags? And up they went. The flag unfurled, flooding the sky with a spectrum of colors. The city radiated with color and sparkle and glitter. And the crowd lit up like gold at the end of the rainbow. Today, the rainbow flag is everywhere, even in the small town of Kansas where Gilbert grew up. Wherever you see a rainbow flag, you'll know that it's okay to be your colorful, sparkly, glittery self.